Ugly Mug marketing friends, welcome to another edition of Ugly Mug Marketing Coffee Chats, the live show where we drink coffee. Mostly I drink coffee and
I
we
drink
chat
coffee
about
too.
marketing. Okay, good. You've got coffee too. The live show where we talk about marketing, leadership, business, everything in between. My name is Hannah Valiet, and I'm the Director of Communications and Teaching here at Ugly Mug Marketing. Today, I am joined by Marketing Department Manager and Event Planning Guru, Hanna Broom. Welcome to the show today, Hannah.
Hi, morning. So glad to be here.
Yes. Okay. I'm pumped that you're drinking coffee because I feel like every other time lately, like Lily drank coffee. I think maybe Abby had coffee, but then Mara doesn't drink coffee. So I'm glad to be in the company of someone who's also drinking coffee this morning.
Mine is stock cold brew. That's my favorite. So it's iced coffee, but it's coffee
Nice.
nonetheless.
Yes, get a little energy boost. That's also what Wesley, for those of y'all who are watching, you're like, who the heck is Wesley? That's my husband. My husband, Wesley, loves that cold brew. That's his all-time favorite. He's like, get the green one.
Yes.
The one with the green label. He's like, not the other ones, the green one. I'm like, okay, got it.
Yes.
It was on sale at Target this week too, if anyone wants to know.
Good to know.
Yes, I've got just whatever coffee they were brewing this morning here at my co-working space in Raleigh. But my all-time favorite creamer lately has been the caramel frappuccino something. It's the Starbucks creamer, the caramel Starbucks creamer, and it is absolutely phenomenal. So that's what's in our cup this morning, y'all. If you are tuning in and watching this live, I would love to know in the comment section where you're tuning in from. Today, I'm really excited to dive into this topic with Hannah because I feel like we haven't really touched on a ton of event stuff. And we are about to jump into a very busy event season for Hannah. And so the timing of this is just excellent. Yesterday, we sent out an email written by Hannah, actually. I'm talking about Hanna Broom, by the way, not myself in third person. Hanna Broom wrote an excellent email yesterday where she was talking about this idea and this concept of energy leaks. And that is really what we are going to be focusing on today. So, Hannah, let's jump into things. Tell us about energy leaks. What is an energy leak? Why is it important? What do we need to know about it? Let's just start there.
All the things. Yes. So this is not a concept I came up with by any means. I read this book. It's called The Art of Gathering, maybe like a year or two ago. And this one little section, I have it, what's that called? Eared? Because it has just resonated with me and I've thought about it and it's living rent-free in my brain on and on and on. And it's just a concept that it says, leaky. Make sure the energy isn't leaking out when you're having an event. And so that's the concept of energy leak, comes from this book. And it's all about how the actual things that you can't see at the event are just as important as what you can see. So making sure that you're not having the example that I used in the email and the example from the book is the easiest example. So it's talking about, for example, if you're at a restaurant and there are four chairs and you have two on one side and two on the other side, the energy kind of just leaks out the side of the table. Whereas if you switch and you have one chair at each section and there's no energy leak, it's very easy for everyone to constantly communicate with one another without that leak. The same thing is true if you have an event space that is far too big for your event. So think about, having an event at the Coliseum and having it for 10 people. Like it just feels weird and, just doesn't, your energy does not feel the room. So an energy leak is any kind of situation, whether it is the physical location you're in or if it's just other things that take part to make the vibe what it is. Making sure that everything is in unison and that vibe or that energy doesn't leak.
Yeah, I was just trying to grab the link for the book so I can drop that in the comments, but I'll drop, Hannah, you had something linked in our document. So I'm just going to drop that here in the comment section so that if you want to grab a copy of that book, like Hannah said, that that very section is living rent-free in her head. Maybe it'll live rent-free in your head after you read it and dive into things. But the book is called The Art of Gathering. So I just dropped the link for anyone who is interested in grabbing a copy of that. But I feel like energy leaks happen so frequently because it seems to be something that we often overlook. We're too busy worried about RSVPs and catering and coordinating all of these other behind the scene things. And I know you just gave us this example of the 4 chairs at the table, but have you ever been to an event where you experienced an energy leak? And describe to us maybe how you felt or what made you realize that an energy leak was happening, and then tell us maybe how you would fix that specific energy leak.
Yeah, for sure. So if Wayne listens to this, he's going to laugh because Wayne, you were right. But there's this situation. I mean, it's been years ago. It's probably been like 4 or 5 years ago. Wayne is Ugly Mug owner. But we were doing an event internally for Ugly Mug at the Holiday Inn, and we had a certain number of people RSVP, bought tickets, said they were coming. And so we set the room for that many people plus a few more. And Wayne just kept saying, like, this room's too big. It doesn't feel right. Like, in order to accommodate the number of chairs that we thought people were coming, like, we just had to make the room bigger than it needed to be. And it just felt empty. And he kept saying, like, I think we just need to remove chairs. And I'm like, no, we can't do that because we need to make sure that we can accommodate every people that RSVP. Well, for some reason or another, I don't know if it was the weather, time of year, but all the people that said they were coming didn't come. And so in addition to the room already being too large because we needed to fit those chairs, we had tons of empty chairs and empty tables. And so it just made it feel like it wasn't the event that it should be. So think about if you go to a sold out Taylor Swift concert and every single seat is filled and there's people just screaming with, they're there with bells on, it's a completely different experience than if you were to go to the exact same concert. If you it's still Taylor Swift in an empty arena with only 10 people and all these empty chairs and people were just sitting there twiddling their thumbs, the performance would be the exact same, but the energy is completely different.
Yes.
Another example in a much smaller situation, my dad always talks about Acme Oyster House in New Orleans. And he says it's such a different experience to go eat at Acme in New Orleans when you have to stand in line on the streets and wait to get your table and then go and eat. And, it's filled and just the noises and everything else versus going to eat Acme anywhere else in the state or the country because it just doesn't have that same vibe. You don't have to wait on your table. You're not, a few feet away from Bourbon Street. And so it's all to say that, yes, your speakers and your food and all of that stuff is important, but all the things around it are what really make a huge difference as well.
Yeah. And you're really speaking to the atmosphere. And I love that you brought up some different examples too, outside of just a working conference or whatever we were hosting for Ugly Mug, because this applies to our personal lives. And this applies to people that own restaurants. It's not just events in the sense that you're thinking of in a business way, right? So I think about this for my wedding. We had energy leaks at my wedding and it bothered me to the nth degree because the people that were sitting on the outside, we had a big tent and we had the dance floor in the middle and a sweetheart table for my husband and I and a stage for our DJ in front of that. So that was the middle. And so the people that were really closest around that, there really wasn't an energy leak because they felt like they were close to the action. But the people who were on the outside, we ended up having some longer tables with guests who didn't come. So there were empty seats. And when in reality, we should have at the last minute pivoted and said, hey, let's remove this table and just change our seating chart a little bit so that those folks that are sitting at the end of that longer table don't feel like there's this weird gap or between them and the next people that are at the table over. And that still bothers me. And I think about that often when I go to weddings, because so much of a wedding is, yes, celebrating the bride and groom and having great food and drinks and dancing the night away, but it's also sitting at that table and just visiting with the folks that are sitting at your table and having good conversation. And if you only have a few folks over here and then no one sitting next to you, it just feels off. It feels awkward.
Mm-hmm.
And so I completely hear what you're saying in terms of going to a restaurant too, because it's that same feeling of like, this place just isn't that busy. It's not buzzing. And that just can throw off the entire experience for someone who's dining in.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So, what are some simple steps that we can take as we are planning our events for 2024, whether it's personal or professional? What can we do to ensure that that energy leak isn't going to take place? Like, how can we just avoid it altogether?
Yeah. So honestly, trying to put yourself in the shoes of your guest as an event planner or a bride or, restaurant owner, we so often stay behind the curtain and think about all the logistics, but we forget to put ourselves in those shoes. So actually
Yeah.
trying to pivot and walk through your schedule as if you were a guest and figure out those things that you might not notice. So how can I try to sit in a table and see how this feeling feels, or is the room too big, is the room too small? Even just other things like maybe switching rooms. So if you have an opportunity to, instead of staying in the entire room the entire day, like try to make your schedule to where it has like levels. So don't
Mm.
bring them their food and sit there and have everything where they're sitting at the exact same seat all day. Have an opportunity where they maybe get up and they go have lunch somewhere else, or whatever that might be. An example slightly different, but it's the opposite of energy leak, but trying to create energy is important too. So I'm helping,
Mm.
my husband is helping putting on a convention for his professional I don't know, department, career, whatever it's called. And
Mm.
one of the things we were talking about is at their cocktail reception last year, they didn't have any music and it was a big room and not a lot of people. And
Mm.
unfortunately, in this situation, we can't overcome the room. But I was like, okay, well, what can we do? Maybe we add music. Maybe we push the bar closer to the door so that people don't have to go all the way across the room and they can just kind of gather closer and create that environment. So maybe there's certain things that you can't do, but put yourself in those situations and try to fill in those spaces. It's just like how you say, you might not remember what someone told you, but they remember how they made you feel. That same is true too. They might not remember what drink you served, what food you served, but they're going to remember how they felt in the space. And so put yourself in those shoes.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, we're trying to create an experience, a memorable moment. We want people to leave saying, wow, I had a phenomenal time at that event, or I really had this great takeaway. But they might not remember what the speaker said. They might not remember all of those like little details, but they're going to leave and say, that was a really great event. And that's all based on how they felt while they were there. Was the room warm and inviting? Were the tables set in such a way that allowed for a lot of conversation? Did the room feel full? Because I will say, people do leave events and they say, oh, it just felt like no one was there. It didn't feel like the energy was really high. Those are the kinds of comments and things that people say when they're leaving events, right? They
Mm-hmm.
don't always necessarily comment on those other details that we're so often worried about when we're planning and coordinating an event. They say things like the energy was off or it just didn't feel very full in there. And I love that you brought up music because I feel like this is a little bit of like a hot topic, right? Like how low or how high do we have music? How do we choose music for our event? And I find that even when I'm hosting something at my house, I'm like, okay, Wes, let's get the dinner
Yes,
music playing in the background, like just something to kind of fill the room a little bit
I
more.
agree.
Like I need that in the background. So, do you have any recommendations, I guess, for types of music to play when, how, where, anything like that? I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot with that question.
Yeah. I don't necessarily have a golden answer, but my go-to, and maybe it's because we're in Louisiana, but I love jazz instrumental music in those situations. You know, you don't have to
Okay.
have words, especially if you want people to be
Yeah.
talking. But I don't know. I love a good jazz instrumental playlist on Spotify. That's kind of my go-to. Um,
Yeah.
but but that is so important too. Like whenever you go to a break, turn on music. Don't just say, "Oh, you have a break. Be back in 20 minutes." Like, because then it just like
Mhm.
it. You want to keep the vibe too, because if you're having like, oh, like somebody just finished a great performance, and then it's like, okay, you have a break. It's like you go from this high to this low. How can we keep this energy flowing? I love this idea. I don't know if it's a surprise, but I'll go ahead and say it. It's not really a surprise, but one of our speakers at an upcoming conference, I won't name the conference just in case anybody's listening. She's like, I know this kind of sounds weird, but could I have a walk-up song before I spoke? Before I go on
Mm.
stage, she said, I know it sounds weird, but I did it at this one conference and it just completely changed the way it felt. And I was like, sure, I love it. So we're going to do
Yeah.
walk-up songs for all of the speakers to just really get that energy flow in. And we're going to let them choose. We want it to be a song that feels natural to them. But, you know, just a little 20-second song for whenever they walk up and just really get the vibe going.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that they're choosing it too, because it lets a little bit of their personality shine. If this event is something that's professional, sometimes we're up there and we're talking about our work, and we can be really passionate about our work, but you don't always get to see that fun personality side of the person sometimes when maybe they're talking about taxes or they're talking about finances or something like that. That's not always a very fun or sexy topic. And so, yeah, to have that walk up song just gives you a little bit of peek of that person's personality too. So I really like that. And it reminds me
Yeah,
of being like at a baseball game and someone's up to
exactly.
bat and they have their walk up song. I'm like, oh yeah, I like that song. And it makes you feel like you're connecting with that person
Connection. Yep.
too. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, I know that song, or that's also my favorite song. And I feel like events that I've been at and I've gotten to talk to somebody afterwards and they've had a walk-up song or something like that. I've gone up to them and been like, "Oh my gosh, did you choose that? I love that song too. That's like my favorite song," or "That song's on repeat." And yeah, just adds that extra connection and builds that personal touch built into the event. So, I love
Yeah.
that.
This is a super random example, but I saw this video, like this reel on Instagram the other day. I'm a big Disney fan, and it talks about like the characters at Disney World, like when they are interacting with, you know, say they're doing like a signing session or whatever, and then it's time for them to go backstage. They don't like. They're not like in character, and then the second it goes time to walk backstage, they just stop character. They stay in character until they get fully backstage. And I think that
Mm,
that is also helpful and something that we could play into events. So, you know, all those little things that you might not see, making sure that everything is just seamless, and your guests don't need to see what's going on behind the scenes. They need to come and feel the energy. They they don't need to know that we're running around frantically backstage trying to make everything perfect. You want them to just
yeah.
see the beauty and actually feel the vibe, because our energy could feed onto them or vice versa. And so we don't want them to get the energy of, oh my gosh, like there's a million things going on
Panicking.
backstage to make sure yeah, panic. We want them
Yeah.
to just see the beauty and just be able to enjoy it. um,
Yeah.
we went and saw a Broadway show in New York, and I will say my favorite part of the entire show, ironically, was when they had an accident. So one of the characters, like one of their props, like just flew, and they went on seamlessly. Like they made a joke about it and they like played it in, and like even there was a child actor, and he even completely just rolled with the mistake, and they laughed about it. And like that was my favorite part, because it didn't take away from the energy. They weren't like, oh my gosh, panic. They just went on with it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that because all of that does feed into it. I'm so glad you brought that up because I have been at an event where all of a sudden something went wrong or it didn't go to plan. And then they started talking about it in front of guests or in front of us who were there as attendees. And so then I was like, oh no, did you hear that? And had I not heard that, I probably wouldn't have noticed it.
I've
But
noticed
that
it.
really did rob some of the energy. Now that I'm thinking about it, it robbed some of the energy away from the room and from the mood because up until that point, everything was going great. and the energy was high and conversation was flowing. But then all of a sudden, it turned our attention away from the conversation that was happening at the table to we're looking around, we're being nosy, right? We're saying, oh, how are they going to, oh no, something went wrong. Oh, we're getting up from our table and walking away and trying to peek and see what's happening. And that didn't help add to the energy of the event. It took away from the energy. So I feel like we've talked about energy in a lot of different ways and forms. So energy can leak when we don't have the right size space. Energy can leak when we don't have our tables arranged in such a way that allows for communication or collaboration at the table. And I think that's really important to think about when we have an event is, do we want to foster communication? Do we want people talking to their neighbor? Or is this something that they're supposed to be quiet and just all eyes on speaker? That might be something that someone needs to consider too when they're setting up. But then also this idea of filling the room music wise. I want to put a pin in filling the room. I'm going to come back to that in a second.
Mm-hmm.
But then also this idea of not letting people see what happens behind the curtains, because that can take away and cause an energy leak as well. I want to come back to filling the room because we think about the tables and tablescapes, and if the table is empty or it just has a plain wrinkled black linen on it, does that fill the room? Does that play into the energy of the room as well? What's your take on having something on the table when guests arrive?
Yeah, absolutely. All of those little things in and of themselves might not matter, but it all plays into the overall feel. So for example, like let's say you're at an event and maybe you do have a beautiful table that you're sitting out, but then you go to get the food and the food is on a fold out table with no linens and you're serving it out of tin pans. It just doesn't feel the same. All of those things really play into the energy. Another idea I like when it comes to filling the room that people might not realize. For example, we do a lot of events over at the Riverfront Center, and they have huge, tall ceilings, which is wonderful because it gives us a lot of opportunity. But how can we fill that vertical space? Like that's super important too. So one of the events that I attended, several events that I've attended at the Riverfront Center, they have stuff hanging from the ceiling. They utilize that vertical space and fill it. And it's actually just really helps encompass that space. Because even if you're full, the walls and the horizontal space, how can you fill that vertical space is super important as well. So maybe you can hang things from the ceiling, or maybe it's just a matter of like doing an uplight so you have colors pointing up onto the walls to help fill that vertical space.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I actually saw a reel. I follow a bunch of balloon art accounts because apparently my new side hustle in 2024 as a mom is making balloon arches and garlands for every single possible event I can insert myself into. But in one of these reels that I was watching, they were talking about that because they were setting up for an event that was in a really large like hotel. It looked like they were using the hotel lobby area, and then the actual event was happening in the banquet room. And the ceilings were really tall and open, and there were like ton of glass windows. And so they were giving tips on how to decorate and make that space feel more full during that cocktail hour. And they had these really cool tall balloons that had fun string and like hanging from them, but they were helium and they went super high up, and it just added, and they did them in different heights. So it just kind of added this like extra layer of dimension. And then they had these tall like balloon pillars that just went straight up as well. And I was like, how cool is that? Because normally when I think of balloons, I'm just like, oh, a fun arch for like a backdrop or something like that. But I loved the way that they did it because it was on brand for the event. Like it was for a particular company. So they like had their logo on the balloons, but yeah, just like filled up that space a little and added some dimension into the space. And I'm sure balloon prices vary, but I'm like, that feels like kind of an inexpensive, fun way. And you could move them too, right? Those are mobile. So you can move those then into the banquet room once that space opens to fill up some extra space in there too.
Okay, so what you were just talking about, like in that example, if you're having like a cocktail hour for a wedding and then you're moving into a banquet room, that flow and what actually happens to get from one room to the next is another opportunity to create energy or to leak energy. So here in Louisiana, for example, a great example, there is a church downtown, and a lot of people have their receptions downtown as well, but it's all within walking distance. So from trying to get from the church to the reception hall, instead of just saying like get in your car and head over, a lot of people do a second line. If you're not familiar with what a second line is, it's like a jazz band, and people will take, I'll show you, I have a napkin. They'll do napkins like this, and just creating that energy. So you keep the energy up, like you follow the bride and groom and the jazz band, and you have your napkin and you do your second line all the way to the reception hall. Like that just creates the energy versus saying like, all right, stop, get in your cars, we'll meet you at the reception in 10 minutes. And then you walk into a quiet reception hall. So all of those things to help create and build that energy and just keep it escalating, there's opportunities all along the way.
Yeah. And cocktail hours happen in professional events too, in between speakers or moving from room to room too, as things are getting reset. So I love that idea of a second line. Or again, you talked about music in between things. Music can be the thing that keeps the energy up. Or maybe you weren't going to serve food and snacks or anything in between, but maybe you add that in to elevate that experience. And again, to just keep that energy going. Otherwise, energy can seep away and we can have those energy leaks.
Yes.
All right, y'all. We have covered a gamut, a very wide gamut, from professional to personal events, weddings to restaurant experiences. We've talked about this idea that the energy leak is something that happens when we don't have our room set up, when we don't have the proper space, when our tables aren't set the right way, when we don't have music in the background, when the room doesn't feel full and the energy doesn't feel high. We've talked about ways to avoid those energy leaks. We've also talked about ways that sometimes we can be contributing ourselves as the event host or coordinator. We can be taking energy away from the room, and why that's important that we don't do that, why we make sure the busyness happens behind the curtain and we allow our guests to have a really seamless, remarkable experience. Hannah, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I know you're in the midst of a lot of event planning. Hannah's working with Louisiana FFA, Louisiana Women in Agriculture, and then what's the other one you're working with? Steubenville South, right?
Yeah, we're helping a little bit. I mean, we're doing the full event planning for the Louisiana Women in Agriculture, and then we're helping a little bit with Louisiana FFA and Steubenville South. So a lot of really fun things. Event planning is my passion, and it's crazy, but I love it. A little bit after we get off this call, we're having our weekly call with Louisiana Women in Agriculture and talking about all the things coming up for their event. And it's a really, really long list, but I love it.
Yeah, I love that so much. Y'all, tune in next week for Coffee Chats. We are switching the date around because next week, Alex and myself are going to be traveling from Grand Rapids, Michigan and Raleigh, North Carolina to Alexandria for our 15th birthday bash at Ugly Mug Marketing. So Coffee Chats is actually going to be taking place on Tuesday afternoon. Mark your calendars. Now I'm blanking on what the date is. I think it's the 13th. It's actually Mardi Gras too, which is really, oh wait, no.
It is not the 13th.
Mardi Gras. It's not the 13th. I'm sorry. It's the 6th. I was mixed up. It's the 6th. I was jumping ahead. Okay. It's the 6th. It's a Tuesday. We're going to be going live at 1:30 Eastern, 12:30 Central. And Alex and I are going to be talking all about AI in marketing, the good, the bad, the ugly, and how you can use it for your benefit as you are marketing your company. You're not going to want to miss out. Alex has tons of great points and information. Yes, we're going to be talking about ChatGPT. We're not trying to beat a dead horse over here, but we really want to show you guys how you can use it to your benefit in 2024. Thank you again, Hannah, for joining us. And we will catch y'all next week, Tuesday, the 6th at 1:30 Eastern, 12:30 Central. Bye, y'all.
Bye.